Okay, there we go. Gansen Sensei, Namo Amida Bu.
Namo Amida Bu, Genkai. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you
Thank you for agreeing to do this.
So
it's a rare treat, a rare privilege to be able to chat with you and see.
It's an honor and privilege to have you on your channel because you're doing great work, and Hogan and all the rest of the guys supporting Josho, and this is what it's all about. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I know it's early there, so thank you for getting up early in Australia to have our. Did I say that right? Australia.
Yep.
Australia.
No worries. I'm not Australian born, by the way. This is my second home, but I've been here for 24 years now. So yeah.
All right. Well, excellent. Thank you so much. So yeah, we might as well go right into it.
Please do.
You just wanted to see, so we could talk about your journey to Jodo Shinshu, to the Amida Dharma. One of the first things right off the bat you emphasize in your bio at the Amidaji website is how you're doing this at the request of Jodo Sensei, and in order to help others, come to Amida Dharma. That seems to be a really important thing right off the bat. I noticed,
Definitely.
with your with your bio that was almost more important than starting talking about you. If you see what I mean.
Definitely, yes.
Which it is, I think, yeah. But so you also right off pretty early on mentioned, you were born in 1958, and so you estimate you only have about 20 years left
on average
to get it done.
Exactly.
So
and
it seems like you have a real sense of of urgency, in terms of the fleetingness of human birth. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Those two things link that you've just mentioned, because obviously, like you, it's been a long and winding road, to quote the Beatles song. Whereas some people get it very quickly, but I think yourself, myself, and Hogan have had many decades before we found this path. In my case, I only started exploring Pure Land in 2016 when I was 58 then. But I've been a part-time student, and I emphasize the part-time student of mainly Tibetan Buddhism since I turned 18. And the book that changed my life was Padmasambhava's Tibetan Book of the Dead, or Bardo Todol. And this is the Robert Thurman translation, who, in my opinion, got the best English translation. There were many others. The first one that was ever done in English was by an American scholar, W.Y. Evans Wentz. And that was done in 1927, but it wasn't ideal, but it was groundbreaking because it was the first one in English. And it became, I think it's still regarded as the most popular of them. But Robert Thurman goes into deep interpretation and analysis, and he's superb. I mean, he has changed my life in so many ways in terms of understanding Buddhism, because he's got a profound intellect. He is a really brilliant man. And I've listened to most of his audios that I could come across, and he's been the sort of guide for me in Tibetan Buddhism throughout that time. But I did explore all the other ones, Theravada, and I looked at Zen, but it never grabbed me. I know for some people it did, and that is probably why I never really looked at the Japanese and Chinese traditions, and that's why I never came across Pure Land Buddhism really until 2016. And can I mention two specific, well, not two, but at least two specific things that really galvanized me to wake up and be serious about it? Because I think it might help others. You never know what karmic seed is going to ripen, and what word or phrase or experience that person describes that might resonate with somebody else. So in my case, it started with Aldous Huxley's Perennial Philosophy, where he was looking at all sorts of religions. In essence, he was trying to look at a highest common factor of all religions, and he quoted from various religious texts, and then he gave some explanatory commentary. And of all of them, Buddhism, I just thought this is amazing, because I hadn't really experienced it in my country where I'd grown up. There were very few Buddhist centers or Buddhist teachers, and the vast majority of those were, I would say, Theravadan. There were very few other traditions there. Certainly, I didn't know of any Mahayana or Tibetan or even Pure Land. So I just had to teach myself through books and then later audio, and only much later, from the 90s onwards, when the internet became more widely available, that I could find good teachers and listen to them, and then really take it to the next level. And even in Australia, I only had one center that I really went to, but it was so far away. It was part of the Gelugpa, and I learned a lot, but ultimately it didn't answer all my questions. And in my personal journey, I was drawn to the Nyingma, which was obviously founded by Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche, who is considered, in certain Tibetan traditions anyway, that I've come across, he was considered an emanation of Amitabha Buddha, which is quite an interesting story. If you'd like, you might not know it, or maybe others don't. The one that I heard was that Avalokiteshvara and was speaking to Amitabha in wherever, and was saying, look at all these suffering beings. We've been doing all these wonderful practices for eons, and samsara is still not getting emptied. We're not making progress, in inverted commas. And so Amida just, in answer, stuck out his tongue, and this comet flew from his tongue and landed in what is now, I believe, present-day Afghanistan or something, but then was India. And it was Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava. And that's why he was able to do these miraculous things. He subdued all the Bon tradition in Tibet, brought Tibetan Buddhism from India to Tibet, and that's why it flourished. And then that led to, obviously, Tsongkhapa, who was the teacher of the first Dalai Lama. So there's a great tradition of Pure Land Amitabha Buddhism in Tibetan Buddhism, but it's not as emphasized as much as the others are in the West. And it's certainly not going to, I certainly didn't feel that when I came to true Shin Buddhism, Jodo Shinshu, it explained it to me a lot more clearer through Paul and obviously Joshua. So I'd like to read just one small passage from this Tibetan Book of the Dead, because it is so, to me, it woke me up. It really gave, to put it bluntly, it gave me a kick in the backside. So I'm just going to find the actual page. I think it was 295. Sure, yes. It's very short, so just bear with me while I get the actual page.
Yes, please,
number.
Of course.
Thank you. It won't be long. Okay, so it is page. I've also got a PDF, so I can enlarge it. It makes it easier to read. So it's actually on page 212, towards the end of the book, and this is very brief. So it's really one paragraph. It says, Padma, and this is Robert Thurman's translation. So he's writing, Padmasambhava seems almost to have given up getting the between being released from the ordinary life cycle into clear light transparency, and is resigned to his being reborn. When he orders the deceased, do not go there, about one of the unpleasant or horrid states, he's calling for a final act of will and courage, a summoning of the power of renunciation to recoil from the prospect of such a terrifying rebirth. He is quite aware, however, that a between being still caught in the currents of habitual drives and evolutionary momentum from former acts will not easily be able to reverse course at this point, not without heroic effort. So remember what's gone before in this book, then that passage will become much more significant. So in this book, he's talking about all the mantras and prayers and all the Buddhas and bodhisattvas and saints and sages saying all these prayers for you for the bardo being. This is after death, between death and rebirth, 49 days they say, but how they define a day might be interpreted different. But just think of that. We are all helpless beings in the bardo. All these wonderful beings and Buddhas are saying prayers for us. We've done all the practices. The Lamas are saying prayers, and yet Padmasambhava is telling us the truth here. The vast majority of us will come towards the end of bardo, and we're going to be reborn, and we don't know what karmic seed is going to ripen, and we could end up in a hellish or certainly a much worse state than we currently are, as bad as we think it is. So if we think of the implications of that, that is a monumental kick up the backside, to put it bluntly. And I then decided to look at myself and say, well, look, I know I've been a part-time student, so I could cop out and say, oh, well, if I'd done it full-time, I would have made more progress. But I had to be realistic. I'm 58. I've got all these health problems. None of us have guaranteed one more day. We never know when we're going to die because we're not enlightened Buddhas. Therefore, I need to get really serious. And that's when I discovered Paul Roberts through serendipity, accident, but I think it was a good karmic seed from the past, one of the few in this lifetime that ripened. So I was actually looking at I don't want to put down anybody, but there was an English guy who talked about Pure Land Buddhism with his wife on YouTube. And then on the sidebar, there was recommendations, and one of them was Paul Roberts. And I clicked on that. After a year of following this other guy, and he was mixing a lot of teachings, and it didn't satisfy me.
I think I know who you mean. I think I know who you're talking about.
But
DB,
I didn't want to.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it. So I didn't want to put. I don't want to put anyone down because they're doing some good things, and I'm sure it's helping some people. I'm just talking about from me personally, and that is why I didn't want to mention it. So, but it's through that I found Paul, and I listened to his 16 videos quite a few times before I plucked up the courage, because remember, I didn't have a teacher. I was all self-taught, virtually 99%.
Yes.
And so I plucked up the courage to email him, and I asked him, Paul, I'm very interested. I've watched all your videos repeatedly. I've got a few questions. I need some more clarity and understanding. I hadn't had a time to read because he's got a huge blog, his website plus his email group. So there's a huge archive of stuff there. I didn't have time to go through it all. So I thought, let me approach him direct, because he did offer. He said, please, and I did. And he was very kind. I spoke to him, I think this was in 2017, the year that he went to the Pure Land. He went there in December 2017. And I think I first spoke to him in about February 2017. And I think I was lucky enough to speak to him 4 or 5 times on Skype. And I was just blown away at his eloquence. He's a really gifted teacher, and he answered all my questions. And the tragedy, just as a personal anecdote, he contacted me, said he wanted to have another discussion. Well, I requested another discussion. He said yes, in the next week or something. And he passed on 3 days after we last spoke. So that was a shock for me. But again, another monumental kick up the backside. And he recommended Joshua. So in January, only a month later, I contacted Joshua and requested that I could be his teacher. I explained my background, and he was very kind to accept me as his teacher. And the rest, as they say, for me, and is history. So that's how I found Joshua. I hope that clarifies.
Oh, definitely. It's the thing that just jumped out at me was the urgency, and I can see where when you read the text, when you read the Bardo Thodol, and you realized your situation, you looked back, you seemed, actually you looked looking at, there's something you mentioned pretty early on in your bio, and the wording is very key to me. So you said, my mother encouraged me to read as a young boy, and I was always reading in an attempt to understand myself, the world, and the seemingly endless disappointments, frustration, pain, and suffering that I and many others experienced all my life.
Yes,
that's quite a big, load, for a young, a young boy, a young child to be aware of. That's a big burden, that you seem to be aware of, pretty early on. Can you talk about that a bit?
I'm glad you picked up on that. I didn't want to go too much personal details, but it is important, I think, for people to understand what drove me and motivated me. And I always wanted it to be about Joshua, Paul, and the Dharma masters, but we all have to start somewhere. And so one person's story might inspire somebody to just at least start exploring. So that's the beauty of your interviews and your channel, because you are now exposing people to different experiences and perspectives that might just spark that thing, because ultimately we all come into this life with karmic burdens from beginning as past, the masters tell us. And so we have no idea. I think in one of my poems I talked about karmic landmines or something. We don't know what karmic seed is going to ripen and explode and wreck all our plans and plunge us back into a lower realm because of our reactions or whatever. So in my case, I was adopted, and I didn't understand all that at the time because it wasn't spoken about. And the country that I was very conservative, so they didn't really understand the full implications of adoption. So basically adoption, which I only discovered my birth mother at 44. I met her once only. And that was a long journey of 2 days by plane. She was a long way away. And I then started to delve into that. But I was subconsciously driven by that total lack of certainty or trust. So for adopted people, it's called the primal wound. So it's like if you get snatched from your mother for whatever reason, you as a baby don't understand that, but subconsciously you do. This is the worst thing that could happen. You are helpless, and if your mother is taken away from you, or you taken away from your mother, same, you are in grave danger, and that never leaves you. And I only discovered all this in the 40s when I read the psychologists and the sociologists who researched it. But that is probably what subconsciously drove me to try and understand what's going on. And yet, I must clarify, I had the most loving, wonderful parents I could have wished for. They were kind, loving, and they gave me a safe, secure environment externally. But internally, it was all uncertainty, fear, chaos, and, there's just no certainty, I suppose, is the best way of putting it that I can think of. So that's what drove me. And I used to read a lot to try and just make sense of myself, the world, etc. And that is why I suppose when I came across this perennial philosophy, Aldous Huxley, who's a very great genius, amazing man. He went blind. I think he was blind for a while, and he was going to become a doctor. Then he went blind, and then he did other things. But he had just an incredible man. But that seed was waiting to be ripened, and that's what led me to Buddhism. But it was a long path to try and find the right place for me.
Sure. So,
does anything else you'd like to ask about that?
Yeah. Well, it seems like even from a young child, even though you didn't know it, you were having a very intense, sort of acute
Suffering.
sense of samsara.
Yes.
Right? You didn't know that's what it was, but that's what it's
Exactly.
your description of what your experience was.
Yes.
That's
because people forget about the emotional, mental, and psychological suffering. It's all very well when you've got one leg, one arm, or something.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody understands that, but when you have a deep psychological trauma, like even after the First World War, all those millions of soldiers who were gassed and bombed and maimed, and people didn't. They understood the physical thing, but they didn't understand the post-traumatic stress disorder, which we only now do. So it's the same with adoption and things like that. So those disorders are actually almost worse than a physical one. And I'm not saying that having one leg or one arm is something that I'd wish on anybody, but I would. In the same token, I wouldn't wish what I experienced on anybody else, because that suffering never goes away. And so, yeah, that is definitely what drove me. But then, instead of becoming addicted, I could quite easily, many people do, you become addicted to alcohol or drugs or escapism or whatever. It was Buddhism that kept me from going completely off the rails, and I made many mistakes in my life. But I look back and I realize, I think if I hadn't have found Buddhism as a rational worldview that explained just about most questions, even if I didn't fully understand the vast Buddha cosmology and so on of an enlightened Buddha, it kept me from, it kept me from going off the rails completely and then looking at things from a rational, commonsensical, observable, empirical viewpoint. Because a lot of people, especially now, where there's so much rubbish spoken, it's all become New Age trash virtually, that people just don't get their bearings. They've lost a sense of reality. And we live in a reality, even though it's a impermanent reality, it still has its own laws of cause and effect, but it's within a greater cause and effect of the Buddha's karma. So that's how I approached it, or have come to see it in retrospect.
My experience was fairly similar, with the sort of traumatic things in my life and the things I had experienced fairly young. Later on, really drove me, along with my just curiosity and fascination with things.
Yes.
But that suffering drove me. It was really probably primarily that suffering that drove me to really examine my own life and just life in general. That, and then I encountered the Buddha Dharma. But it's hard to say which came first there.
Yes, sure.
Sometimes it's when I look back. But anyway, so you were pretty well. You would have been already reading a lot, pretty well read by the time you were 18. And
but
then
it wasn't Buddhism. I mean, I've been reading mainly, obviously, Christianity, history, biography, literature, and then sort of general science, because I never had a interest in hard science and mathematics, although I was interested in the history of science and the great scientists and how they came about their discoveries. And in fact, the American Bill Bryson wrote probably the best introduction to the history of science for a layman, a short history of nearly everything. It is not only brilliantly done and researched, it's very funny. And so he actually interviewed all the great scientists that were still alive at the time he wrote, and asked them, how did they come to make these discoveries, or then talk about scientists in the past? And he did it so brilliantly, but it's all backed with good, solid research. So he did a really great job. And incidentally, he lived in England for many of his years of his life and married an English lady. So there's a bit of similarity to you, I think.
Yeah. Excellent. So, and then so you were already reading and studying various things to try to figure things out, to try to examine life, to try to understand things. And then it was when you were 18 is when you encountered the perennial philosophy and Bardo Thodol, which are, that's two pretty big things to come upon at the same time. Yeah,
absolutely. Because he quoted, Aldous Huxley quoted from the Bardo Thodol and other great Buddhist texts, but that was the one that really stuck in my mind. And then I think later on I started to look for other translations, because I didn't quite get everything. And until I read Thurman, who put it all together just brilliantly, because he's got an introduction to Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, and how everything fits together, but he's done it in a book of less than 300 pages. It's a masterful achievement. And an interesting anecdote with that book, he was told, because he was a student of the Dalai Lama, I think, for 5 years, lived as a monk and all that. Then he came back to academia, and then his guru at the time in New York was a Tibetan Lama, but this guy gave him this manuscript and he said, this will be important to you. And he wasn't interested in it at the time, and that was the Bardo Thodol. And then later on, he was led to do the translation, or he was asked to by a publisher or something. And then he remembered his Lama. So, there's a lot of serendipity, but also karmic seeds
or karmic ripening.
Exactly right. Exactly
as we might say. In the Buddhist vernacular.
Absolutely.
But I also wanted to mention, Robert Thurman was also pretty big influence with me. A lot. It does seem like not just, I'll just speak to that really quickly. That he was a big influence in my life, in my journey with Buddhism. It's so many. He's written so much, and so many just articles. I was one of the readers of Tricycle magazine back in the day.
Me too.
Which I know we there's varying opinions about the magazine, but it was a key part of my early delving into and interest in Buddhism. So, but anyway, he was often writing articles in that. That I would read, or there was articles about him, or things like that. So but anyway, he was an influence. And the other thing I wanted to say is a lot of us seem to, there's a lot of us that seem to come in. One of the big Buddhist teachings that we first encounter or encounter early on, and is a significant influence, is Vajrayana, is Tibetan Buddhism. You know, I just always think I think that's interesting because of, and often those of us that come, you know, that was an influence, we later on realized Padmasambhava was a manifestation of Amida, you know, and then it just makes sense, you know, that
absolutely
that Amida worked through that to bring us that, you know, along in our journey. So that was just something I wanted to mention. So you were quite a reader, quite a studier, quite a student, even before you were 18, and is that what influenced your becoming? You eventually became a career lifelong librarian.
Yes,
is that kind of
absolutely? But I would have become a teacher, I reckon, if I wanted to be a school teacher. But I grew up where I grew up. We had to go to the nearest government school. My parents weren't wealthy. My dad was a carpenter. My mother was a stay-at-home mother to begin with, and then economics, which is a whole nother story of how it happened, not personally, but just worldwide in the West, how people were forced to go and have 2 full-time incomes to survive. But anyway, so initially, you know, she was a stay-at-home mother, which my sister and I had just a wonderful upbringing. We were very blessed. But I lacked self-confidence because of, and I only discovered why when I was in my 40s, because of the adoption. It's just a very common trait, but it's a huge spectrum. It's a continuum. So some people are crippled by it, other people, they hardly notice it. So I went to a very rough school, and I'd seen so many teachers. It was a boys-only school, and there was a lot of bullying, and some of the teachers were having nervous breakdowns because the kids just were running out of control, and there wasn't that much ability to discipline them for various reasons. So I knew that I was hopeless at disciplining, and I had no interest in disciplining kids who didn't want to learn, didn't want to waste my time. So that is why I went into that profession as the closest next best thing. And academic life, I didn't want to get I was always interested in a broad spectrum. So academic, you had to over-specialize, and then you're becoming sort of the old cliche about you know more and more about less and less until you know everything about nothing kind of thing, you know, that old cliche. So I didn't want to get sucked into the academic world as well. So that to me was probably the best compromise. And initially that turned out well, but towards the end it became a nightmare because it was all about politics and political correctness and wokeness, or whatever the term is. And so you couldn't spread the truth, which is what I was interested in doing, spreading the truth through the best books that I'd read. And also, if people asked me personally, then I could recommend the Buddhist books that had meant a lot to me, and or great scholars like Thurman had recommended or written, because I always tried to distinguish between my likes, preferences, dislikes, and opinions from what the real saints, sages, Dharma masters of the genuine traditions were teaching. And then I'd say, look, this is how I see it, but please go to the original text and then find a good commentary or a good teacher who can explain any problems that are beyond my comprehension. And that is why my poems and essays, I've always tried to do that. I've tried to use it as an introduction to the Dharma text, and always encourage them to go and speak with or write to Josho and get clarity from a genuine teacher who has more wisdom, knowledge, and understanding than I do. So that's been my whole approach.
Excellent. That's a very good approach.
Yes, very because good. I know how many mistakes I made and how times I would explore different traditions or whatever, not just in Buddhism, because I looked at Taoism and Hinduism and Confucianism, and then the Christian mystical tradition from which I learned a lot. You know, people like the Cloud of Unknowing, The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis, and John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress, and all that. To St. Augustine, the Confessions, it said all that was wonderful, but the worldview is what I just didn't explain reality to me.
Yeah.
I think that they were good people, good ethics, good morals, good values, but it just didn't fit into a rational viewpoint, which is a worldview, which is what Buddhism does. For me, I can only speak for me personally, but it resonates with a lot of scientists. There were quite a few good physicists who were seeing the parallels between the Buddhist teaching and what they were discovering. However, a lot of physicists still have this worldview of we started from the Big Bang and then we're going to go either into a big crunch or we're just going to drift into sort of black emptiness. They don't posit anything before the Big Bang, whereas the Buddha posits multiple universes and endless time.
Yes.
And that makes so much more sense to me, because as far as my limited understanding, I'm not a scientist, and I haven't got training in that, but I did read good layman's texts by reputable scientists. So, yep, that makes sense.
No, I agree. That was often my experience when I was exploring other than the 1995 non-Buddhist paths. One of them being Taoism. That was a significant one, actually.
Yes.
But I found that as I went along, Buddhism and Buddhist cosmology always explained things much better and more comprehensively, and where others didn't.
Yes.
Or I'd see something in something else, whatever it was. I would, whatever it was, whether it was science or philosophy or another religion, I'd hear something that I'd really key into something that I was reading or looking into, and realize, yes, well, that's what Buddhism says, only better.
Exactly.
Only
exactly.
It always pointed me back to Buddhism, especially exactly. Science, actually.
Yes.
I in some ways, I almost feel like if you take science far enough, you'll get to Buddhism.
Possibly.
In some ways, if you take it to its nth degree, to the point where you can't take it any further, it'll take you to Buddhism. Almost.
Yes, with a few provisos.
Almost.
Yes, but with a few provisos. Science as practiced only talks about, supposedly, yes, it doesn't include ethics, morality, and then the law of karma as explained by the Buddha, which is a vast and for us incomprehensible, because it's beginningless time. And so there's so many interconnections and causal factors. It's not just a one-to-one linear. It's multiple at the same, simultaneous. And it's almost like, it's not actually explainable in purely human language terms. You can't do it completely and accurately, but it's certainly, you're right. I think karma, laws, cause and effect is what science espouses to. It just won't take that next leap to saying, well, we have no proof that there was just one universe and one Big Bang. And if they went beyond that, it would open up their minds, but it still doesn't address the ethical things which science of itself, in and of itself, alone cannot address. And that is where the Buddhist ethics and values is so much, so brilliant, because it links to the law of karma and cause and effect. So, yes. And of course, I mean, that Shinra in Tanisho, Josho, in his Path of Acceptance quotes that cause, the passage on karma. It's just brilliant, blows my mind. So we're all in that boat, and that boat is very dangerous. So no time to waste.
Very dangerous. And since you've brought that up at this point about the Tanisho, I notice in your bio on Amidaji, on the Amidaji website, that you've quoted quite a bit at the end of your bio from Tanisho. And that part of it is as long as what you wrote about yourself. If you look at the article, it's half your life, which actually that's even less, because you have that introductory part. So more than half of it is quotes from Tanisho. And that seems like that was a pretty significant thing you wanted to convey there. So do you want to talk about that a bit? The quotations that you.
The reason I chose the Tanisho was because, again, I've bought all these books in hardcover, but I used to read them in PDF because I've got a few problems with my eyes. They just get tired. But so the Tanisho for me is such a short book, and yet it covers just about all the major important aspects of Jodo Shinshu. Obviously, Joshua goes to far greater depth in his commentary on the larger sutra and all his other books. But if you want an overview, an introduction, just for me, I'm speaking personally, that was the first one that I read. And to me, it deals with just about all the major questions, all the major problems that I personally have, and I'm sure many others did. And it's so easy to understand. And it was written by a student of Shinran. And so to me, it's like getting the direct words of Shinran explained to you and clarified. It's just a real gem and a real jewel for me. And that is why I always recommend it to people to try that. But whenever they might find another path, and then they just got to contact Joshua. But for me personally, that book just explained so much and clarified so much of the questions and doubts, or not doubts, but the things that I was not sure about, and helped me understand my path and my past. And also because I'm trying to use my little poems and essays to be a little Dharma gate, because I'm not a Buddha. Now, we know that Buddha had 87,000 teachings or whatever, which was not meant to be a precise number, but it meant he had so many because he was enlightened. So he could address his sutras or his teachings to the audience that he was speaking with, whether it's one person or 100, because he could understand their whole, karma and their history and everything. So his teachings were perfect. Because we're not enlightened, we can't do that in the same way. But if we can quote the masters who come closest to conveying true Dharma, to me, that is so precious. And that's what helped me, because I did it all through books and reading on my own. And I want that to strike a spark or whatever, and ignite a fire in the brain or whatever, and say, this is something that I've got to look at further. And therefore, let me find the true Dharma text and the true Dharma teachings. When there, as you know better than most, there's so many false teachers out there, and Joshua's latest book and his autobiography deals with that as well in great detail. So is there anything specifically you want to ask about them? Because there's quite a few quotes.
Well, was it? I mean, it seems like most of them kind of relate to things, things that you were kind of emphasizing in your own journey.
Yes.
So I just thought, what was it that mainly prompted you to? I mean, I know you've explained why that's an important text to you, but to include that in your biography to that extent, that's what.
I thought that many people might have similar questions or uncertainties. I don't know if that's quite the right word, experiences that they could at least relate to. So I can relate it to my experience with Paul Roberts. A lot of what he explained about his search, some of that resonated with me, but also the words he used, the way he teaches, the way he expressed himself, which I just think he's very eloquent and he's a really gifted teacher. And I don't have that level, but I'm trying at my level to do my best. And I just thought if I could find some passages that resonated with me at that stage of my journey to Jodo Shinshu, and I'd only been doing it, I think, about a year or so at that stage. No, maybe 18 months in total with Paul and Joshua, because I think I only started in about August 2018 doing poems. And so that's about 18 months, yes. So I just thought that those passages resonated with me, and hopefully Joshua's students or potential students might come across it through listening to my path and the essays, poems, and narrations of his books. It might resonate with them, and they said, here's someone who's wanted to find out more, contacted Paul, and now Joshua, I can do the same. So it was just being an example, however feeble or whatever, maybe they just could relate to my level, because I'm not a enlightened master, I'm not a full-time teacher or anything like that. I'm just trying to do my best at the level at which I am. And we've all got different levels, and we can all learn from each other, because we've all got different karmic inheritances and seeds that are ripening at various times. So each time I listen to somebody, I learn something new. Well, get a different perspective, which is what you're doing on your channel.
Yes.
So
yes.
Is that helpful?
No, it does. Yeah. No, that's exactly explains what I was asking there. And it's, Tanisho, it's such a good example of straight transmission of the teaching, not theorizing, not philosophizing, not speculating. I'm transmitting the teaching as it was given.
Yes.
And it's like an example,
for it's a
teachers.
Warning. Yeah. It's a warning to us today. They were facing Renyo, and then what's the guy who wrote Tanisho again? Yenbo. The student of Shinran had the same concerns, was facing the same difficulties that about 200 years Renyo was facing about the divergences and the false teaching. Look at what we're facing today, not just in the West, as you can see from Josho's autobiography books, the world over. And so where do people then go for genuine Dharma and genuine teachers? Because remember, I think he does a very good explanation, Joshua, in his commentary on the larger sutra about the 18th vow and the soul exclusion. If we mislead people, that is the one unforgivable inverted commas sin. In other words, we are self-condemning by teaching false Dharma. So to me, that is the most important thing that I can convey to people. Acknowledge the problem of your ego getting in the way, your opinions and your feelings and your views and your likes and dislikes are completely and utterly irrelevant because you are not an enlightened Buddha. If you are, different story. But who are we to know? Only a Buddha can know. So that's the problem that I think, well, I shouldn't say I think, but it just seems to me that is the problem. People are not looking honestly inward and say, look, let's acknowledge our weaknesses, our strengths, and our ignorance. And let us learn from good teachers and wise Dharma masters who are teaching the true Dharma from a true lineage that was originally taught by Shakyamuni and Nagarjuna. And anybody who knows anything about Nagarjuna knows that he's brilliant. The second Buddha kind of thing. And the Tibetans revere him. Almost every tradition does. His intellect and yet he's too bowed down before Amida and acknowledged that he needed Amida's salvation. And so he's our role model, the ultimate. Nobody can say that they are better than Nagarjuna. So that's fun. And Robert Thurman is really big on, the wisdom of Nagarjuna. And yet at the end of the day, and Nagarjuna still said, I prostrate and bow before Amida Buddha. And we say the Nambutsu.
I always find that just just blows my mind.
Absolutely. Where does that leave us? We don't have a leg to stand on. We're right at the lowest of the low.
If he comes to the point where he says, okay, wait, you know what? This is too hard. Really? What are we going to do?
And have you come across and have you come across the teachings, who did it? I think it's on Paul's website. The 7 Dharma masters, the Indian, the Chinese, and Japanese masters of the tradition, as recognized by Shinran, that preceded, all the way from Honen back to Nagarjuna, back to Shakyamuni. So you just read their lives and their teachings, and you're just blown away by their supreme wisdom and compassion. And so we just need to, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's been done for us. We've just got to, do the genuine thing and listen to the genuine Dharma, and then be humble and grateful that this has all been made easy for us. Because that was the beauty of Paul's teachings, the fact that we're in the Dharma Engine age, the age of Mappo, the fact that self-power practices no longer work, and they didn't work in Shinran's time, so I think we're spiritually a lot worse now. So I think, that's...
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think getting back to basics all the time, and that's what I'm trying to do with my poems and essays, because and then I always say, if you want to go to the next step and get a deeper understanding, then I found no one better than Joshua, because he goes into great technical detail, explaining all the passages, the sutras, and the teaching very clearly. And if you still don't understand, he can explain it face to face. Or he can have discussions with someone like you or Hogan, who've got channels, who are genuinely following the path, and maybe they can relate better to you. Because, like, I think I liken it to, I like the analogy, if you're climbing the Himalayas, not everybody can sort of run up the Himalayas and get to the Everest. It's hard. So if somebody's come back from the peak, and then they can tell you that, all right, there's a few obstacles on the way, they can make recommendations, and at least then you sort of got some guidance and mentoring and help. That's what we all need. And we don't know which stage we're all at. And that is why I'm trying to stick always mainly to Renyo and to Yenbo and to Shinran, because we've got a very limited time, and it would be nice to master all of them, but I know my limitations and my age and my time. And that's what I'm saying, to just concentrate on Josho and then Shinran and Renyo and Yenbo. And you'll cover most of the problems, and then you can go into the other stuff later if you have time. But get that down, get the foundations right first, which is why I like, that's Honan, isn't it? That's the path between the two rivers.
Yeah. Yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
I picked it on purpose. Yeah. I think
fantastic.
I want to start using this for the interviews, because I think it's a fitting, the journey down the white path, the trudging the white path towards,
And if you make a false step, and then you go down, and you know how many lifetimes before you'll meet this Dharma again. That's another frightening thing. What did Shakyamuni tell us? We've got about as much chance. Human beings have got the best chance, but we waste it. And yet, what does he liken it to? One of these giant ocean-going turtles that surfaces once every 1,000 years or something in a ring in the middle of the Pacific. I mean, it's just, that's how little chance we've got. And we've still got the best chance of all people on this earth. It's frightening. I was
trying to explain that to my niece today.
Okay.
It was her birthday.
Okay.
And
how old is she?
So she's very curious about my Buddhist path. And so we celebrated her birthday last night, and then she was here today. And,
how old is she?
She is 26 now.
Wow. Okay. So that'll be a good one.
Yeah, and and so I was explaining to her why I, as a Buddhist, what the real reason I would be celebrating a person's birthday. It's not because, yay, I'm born into samsara, woohoo, yeah. No, it's because you have the greatest, it's a rare birth.
Yes.
To be born as a human is a rare thing, and it's a rare opportunity to be able to access or make a tie with, a karmic tie with the Amida Dharma, or the Buddha Dharma, and ultimately the Amida Dharma. Yeah. And
one other thing, we're one birthday closer to death, and we don't know when that's going to be.
Yeah.
So there's no time. Robert Thurman always used to say there's no time. We haven't got any time, so we better get serious. Can I know time's running out, so may I just make one general comment, then you can ask whatever you want to.
We kind of got started a little bit late, so we can go over by about sort of 10 minutes or so if you want. Okay. Yeah. So
I'll just make the comment, and then I'll do that whatever you want to in the next 10 minutes. Just to say that the other reason I wanted I offered to narrate Joshua's books for him, and then my poems and essays, was because as a librarian, we had, back in my home country where I was born and lived for 39 years, we had libraries, they called it tape aids for the blind, because in those days there was just audio tapes. So we used to visit people who were in old age homes or nursing homes or whatever, and they were blind or they had a visual impairment. And so they were so grateful, because we were always expanding, and we had all these volunteers as this part of this organization to do recordings, and then we would deliver them to these people. And it just meant so much to them, because often they're sitting alone and they can't read, and you don't want them to be subject to the radio or the TV or whatever. They can listen to good books. And I just thought, this would be, and I learned a lot from listening to the YouTube videos from the Tibetan Buddhists and all the other Buddhist teachers I listened to. And you could do that while washing the dishes or whatever as well, but also just concentrating. If your eyes are tired or whatever, you can just lie back and close them and listen. And I thought this is very important. So people can read it, but they can also listen. And if they can't read, they can listen as well. So that was my motivation there. And because I benefited and I'd seen the benefit from my work with other people, and it does make a great difference to people's lives. And so just on that, some of the narrations I've did have been done when I had a very bad sore throat. Where I live, it gets very cold and dry by Australian standards. And I think for a month or two, I have to apologize to the listeners that some of my recordings, because I don't have any fancy equipment, I'm just doing it straight into my laptop using Audacity, I think it is, to just edit a bit. And I'm not a master of that either. And it's just using the Windows recording thing. So it's not like studio quality. But I just wanted to apologize for my voice being bad on some of the recordings, because that was the problem. It lasted for at least a month, I think. I just couldn't get rid of it. I had this very dry hoarse cough, and it affected my voice. I'm so sorry about that. So I just wanted to add that for any listeners who wondered why some of my narrations were like that.
Well, I can assure you that we are nothing but grateful. This is one of the things I wanted to bring up was, that the work that you've done in narrating and helping with, the reading of Josho Sensei's works, in terms of the,
it's an honor and privilege and a thank you to Paul
with the
and
translation and things, we're so grateful for that. We're so, I just wanted to thank you personally.
Thank you very much.
That's been a huge part of my journey, is listening to your narrations of Josho Sensei's books. I must have put so many views on his on those books, in those channels, those videos, because I listened to them over and over. This is before I even contacted Josho Sensei.
Okay.
I was listening to his books over and over again.
Well, that's what I did.
I have to rewind a lot because monkey mind.
Of course.
I've got a pretty big case of monkey mind.
Me too. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. It means a lot to me, because that was the whole reason I did it. And I was doing it to say thank you to Paul and to thank you to Josho, and of course the Amida Dharma Masters, because without them, I know and I'm presuming many others would not be able to understand it and benefit from it. And it's you can't repay it, but it's one small way. And you're doing it with your channel, and like Shaku Joshin's doing it, and Hogan. They are spreading the Dharma, and I listen to a lot of Joshin's YouTube videos, and I learned a lot from him and his path, and he was kind enough to speak to me one-on-one a few times. My only problem is that I'm not able to do it. I'm only able to do it part-time, and I've got birds right outside my window. Some of them can be very loud, so if I don't wake up early enough, I can't do it on that day. So that's the problem. So it's taking me longer than I'd like, but I've been doing it since August 2018. And so I've done the best that I can in that relatively short period of time. And my intention is to keep going as long as my health holds out. And my commitment was to write 108 poems for Josho, which he asked me to do, and I've done that. And as you know, 108 is a significant number in Buddhism. Yep. And it's also 6 times 18, the 18th vow. So I was going to put it in 6 separate volumes. And that's another quick thing. I'm going to get it published in 1 volume, but without all the Dharma text, because it would be too long. If I put all the Dharma, it would be over 1,000 pages. So it's just going to be the poems. It's going to be roughly 230 pages, something like that, with the introduction or whatever. And all the proceeds of those sales will go to Josho. I've already said that to Josho. Unfortunately, I believe Josho tells me that Amazon takes 60% of the profits, but everything else will go to Josho. And so if any of your readers wish to...
The Amidaji temple.
That's right. Yeah, exact. Josho and his mission.
When you say Josho, that's what you mean.
That's what I mean. Yes, exactly. Because we're here to support his mission. And eventually he wants to, as you know, establish missions centers all over the world, which is great. And so that's what I'm trying to do through my poems, and I'll do the same with my essays, which I'll try and keep to 10 pages. So after 18 essays, that'll be 180 per book. So depending how many I finish, that's the whole idea, is to spread the Dharma and some raise whatever little money. I know poetry is not popular, so I don't expect there'll be big sales, but at least the people who are listening to this because having a physical book might actually become very important these days, because we
Yes.
don't know what they're going to do to the internet.
Yes, exactly.
And also the Tibetans are very big on the physical texts. In fact, I think most Buddhists really treat them as precious treasures. So, even if you prefer to listen or read it as a PDF like I do, just having them there is very important. Okay, so thank you for that digression. This is important.
And thank you for giving me the background on that. I didn't know that it was, that Jodo Sensei had asked you to write 108 poems, and I didn't know that whole sort of. That's quite cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I offered to help, and I said, look, I'll write some poems. And when he said 108, I said, Josh, I don't know if I'll even make 18, but I tried. And then the more I read, because at that stage, remember, I hadn't read all his books and I hadn't read all the texts. I was still learning, like we all are. And then I tried to jot down ideas, because my memory's bad. So if I don't write down an idea then and there, I'll forget it. And they come to me at the most inopportune times. And then I try and work on it later, to try and then find the appropriate text that links somewhat with the poem, so that people can, be led to the text. And I'm trying to do the same with the essays. The essays take a bit longer, because with my poems, I'm trying to be succinct and just one or two ideas and concise and hone in on a very specific subject or topic, and make it easy as an introduction and a motivation to explore a good teacher like Josho and the true Abhidharma Dharma texts. So that's what my purpose and intention was.
It's I think a lot of people do actually respond to it from my sort of observations and people I've communicated with, and I mean, there's the people love the, for instance, people love the hymns of Shinran, or
yes.
I know that in the True Shin Buddhism email group Sangha, that's poetry is very important, and a lot of the members kind of
that's true
share their own poetry, write their own poetry, and share it through the email group.
But
so it does seem to be a an important something that people really resonate with, identify with, or is an expression of their gratitude, or of somehow that it's deeply meaningful. It seems like
that's
to
good
a lot
to know.
of
But
Amida Dharma followers.
Yeah, that is good to know. But just remember, it was also intended to be an introduction to the text. So a lot of those guys just write the poems and they sort of stand alone. I've tried to link it to the text and as a teaching mechanism as well.
Yes.
But also for people that might not know, every single poem or essay that I write, before it gets published on Josho's channel or his website, I ask him to make sure that I haven't misunderstood or misinterpreted the Dharma so that other people do not get misled. It's not deliberate, but I always try and he checks it out, and he also chooses all of the excellent illustrations that accompany my poems. And I think that is a very important aspect that attracts people maybe to some of the poems. So I'm really grateful to him for that as well. So we're all here to do our little part to, what is it, the golden chain of Amida Dharma? Is it, am I got the right phrase there? So we're all part of that golden chain in our, spreading Amida Dharma however we can in our circumstances, whatever strengths and weaknesses we've got. And so if I had more time, maybe I would have had a channel, but I have limited time and energy, so that I'm doing what I think will have the biggest bang for the buck through my essays, poems, and narrations.
No, it's very excellent. I'm very grateful to have them, and we'll definitely have you back for another Gankai interviews to discuss get more into the poetry and get more the poems and more into the essays.
But I really also am starting to listen to more of your stuff on your channel, and of course Shoko Joshin. I admire the way you can just speak to the camera sort of almost without much preparation, although I know you do prepare because of your studies and everything. But it's really quite a good gift that you've got to do that, to be being able to talk to the camera in that way, in such a relaxed, genuine way. I think that really is good. And you and Josh do it, and so does Hogan. And Hogan's done those lovely. Has he composed, or he's got set that beautiful music to Joshua's words that I've narrated.
Yeah, that's
Beautiful
really nice,
job.
isn't it?
Oh yes, I'll ask you something off camera later, if I may. Just one quick thing. Thank you.
But yeah, it's so great. All the the members of Amidaji who have taken fantastic to YouTube with videos.
Absolutely,
it's lovely. It's really, and
that's the way to go.
I've listened to Joshin's brother Joshin's videos a lot over the years.
Me too. Yeah,
even the ones that he at one point he had a channel. He took it down.
Me too.
But I had listened to a lot of those videos over the
Me
years.
too. I think I listened to just about all of it.
And I had a little bit of contact with him, but before I was even in contact really with him, I'd listened to a lot to his videos. I still do. Do. Every one of them.
He was an inspiration to me because he'd had such a difficult path, and with his background and parents and everything, and he'd come through, and it's really an inspiration because we all have our challenges, but his were particularly difficult. You can have nothing but admiration for him for doing that and then sharing it. He's done a great job.
But that was one of the things. A lot of his background, even though there was a lot of differences, there's a lot of similarities with our background. So I often call him my brother from another karma.
Yes. So I think,
anyway,
we're all lucky that.
But it's great. It's great that we have the whole, so many Amidaji, members getting really active to try to spread the Amida Dharma. And I want to just again thank you for all the work that you've done for the Sangha and to spread that word, because it's been invaluable to my own path, and I know it has been to others.
I'm very grateful for that, but I'll just reiterate, it's come from, thanks to Paul and Joshua, their inspiration, their wisdom, their insights and knowledge have really been so much benefit to me. I suppose if I use a simple analogy, they are the sun, I'm the moon. I'm just reflecting. And I know in their case, they're also reflecting Amida, Shakyamuni, and the Dharma masters. So we're all doing it to the best of our abilities with our whatever, things we can do to spread the Dharma. So thank you for that. It's very much appreciated, because I'm sort of operating on my own here. I don't have any, I'm married, but my wife's not interested in that. This sort of stuff, which I respect. Sure. That's fine. But she's very supportive of what I'm doing. So I'm grateful for that. But it's just nice that I've got some contacts that really help, keep you going. And because otherwise it is quite isolating. And I'm just sad that I can't wake up early enough to join your groups. But if I ever do, I will try. But I've just got so many commitments. And as I get older and I get, I'm 6'3", 1.91 meters, and I weigh 105 kilograms. So losing muscle, it's just exhausting, dragging the carcass around all day. So in the afternoons, I've just got to rest. I've got no choice. And it also, my brain is slower and my memory's not so good. But in the mornings, I'm still fresh. So I've got to try and cram everything in that very brief part of the day. I've literally only got 6 to 8 hours before midday, and then it starts to go downhill rapidly. So look, I know your time's precious. You've got commitments.
Yes, well, thank you so
anything
much.
Else, if there's anything else you want to cover that we should have covered this week, we can incorporate it next time we just talk about the poems and essays. Yeah, is that okay?
Definitely. Right. Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a great discussion tonight. Thank you so much. And we'll see you we'll definitely have you back, and we'll discuss those poems and those essays and get into some other discussions as well. Maybe we'll have you on Shaku Brothers at some point. Maybe I'll try. If we can swing it. It's just my time zone is out of whack with everybody else's. Yeah, and I'm in the Brisbane time zone, and so in summer, for example, it's even another hour out. Yeah. I'm in the winter now. So but anyway,
I still try and listen to those as when I can, and it's very helpful. And so you guys do a great job.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
See you
Thank you
next
very
time.
much.
Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you. Thank you very
Take
much,
care.
Frank.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
day.
Same
Bye-bye.
to you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.